Once again, I want to thank you for coming to our conference this year and for participating so actively in all of our sessions. The folks who were running those sessions yesterday have indicated that their sessions were packed, with the possible exception of the last one, and that we really had some great interaction with all of you, and we really appreciate that. Everything we do is based on your feedback and what it is that we're trying to accomplish together. So your comments, your suggestions, your interactions are really important to us. Also, you will be receiving an online survey about the conference, and we also would like your feedback on that. I'm sure you're going to suggest that they finish the construction and open up the parking lot, and I can assure you that'll be on my list of suggestions as well. But please give us feedback about the conference so that we can try to improve it for you for next year. Last night, I threw away the speech I'd written and started over. I want badly to be funny and inspirational and upbeat and so forth, but the fact is I need your help. And our kids need your help. Let me explain. Yesterday in a meeting about what we've come to call the transfer situation in the St. Louis area, we were talking about money and tuition and counting and state law and transportation and class sizes and budget cuts. You get the picture. The folks in both the sending districts and the receiving districts are trying very hard to make this work. The two superintendents in the sending district have been on the job for less than a month. Many of their team members are also new to their districts. They're desperately trying to figure out how to pay the tuition they're responsible for, arrange and pay for transportation, and still provide quality education for the 80% of their children who will remain. And you think you have problems. The fact is, we all have problems. The failure of these two school districts to serve their children well is more than the foibles of past local administrations or school boards. It's more than the action or inaction of the legislature. It's more than poverty or race or dysfunction in families. It's a fundamental issue that we as a state must confront and must solve. Every child has a right to a quality education. Every parent has the right to want quality education for their children. The courts have said if they can't get it where they live, they have the right to go somewhere else. While we can and have argued about whether or not this is fair to districts or fiscally possible or logistically practical, it is the law. More than that, I would ask you, as Deb Delisle did yesterday, what would you do if it was your child? While I have confidence that the two superintendents in these two districts can and will make a positive difference, it will take time. It may take more time than they have than their parents will give them. The problem is urgent, and I would suggest it's not just a problem that belongs to these two gentlemen. It belongs to all of us. The failure is Missouri's, not just that of two struggling communities. Our former commissioner, Bob Bartman, once said, 99% proficiency is not good enough. He knew years ago, what some of us have more recently accepted, that the public will no longer tolerate schools that do not perform at high levels. Accountability is a reality of our work as employees of the public. We are all responsible for what we do and what we don't do. We who have chosen to work in schools have an awesome responsibility for the lives of the young people we serve each day. Their futures depend on what we do and what we don't do to prepare them for the world after they leave us. Along with our communities, we have to demand excellence for all. We also have to lead the way to demand equity. Our dreams simply cannot come true, and Missouri will never reach the top 10 if we leave anyone out. We must all dedicate ourselves to the support and the assistance of the weakest among us. To leave out even one person is to violate our commitment to do what is right and what is fair. One of our board members always says, it's not just an economic imperative, it's a moral imperative. Martin Luther King said, I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the oughtness that forever confronts him. Dr. King modeled a can-do attitude about achieving equity that serves as an example for all of us. Each and every one of you, regardless of where you are, shares in the responsibility for the children of our state. Everyone matters. In one game during his rookie season, another King, former Chicago Bull Stacey King, managed to score a single free throw, while a teammate named Jordan was totaling 69 points. Asked afterward for his reaction to the whole affair, King said, I'll always remember this as the night Michael and I combined for 70 points. Our success depends on expectations. If we don't allow ourselves to dream, to set high standards, to expect that all of our children can succeed at high levels, it simply won't happen. It's not enough to expect success in the suburbs or in a small country town. High achievement can't be something we find in a classroom here and there for some children. Access to AP classes or Chinese or calculus can't be a function of zip code. The ability to learn in a digital environment can't be restricted just to those who someone chose to connect with fiber. Our expectations for every child, in every classroom, in every school, in every corner of our state, have to be strong enough and high enough to supersede all the challenges we face. It is time to take a stand. A Protestant clergyman in Germany put in words how important taking a stand really is. He said, in Germany, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade union members, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't in a trade union. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me. And by that time, there was no one left to speak up. What's at stake? Nothing less than America's noble experiment, universal education for all citizens, a cornerstone of our democracy, and one that finally, after all these years, supports not just access, but quality for every child. Quite simply, defending public education is not about defending our jobs or our districts. It's about defending the rights of all people to the American dream. It means defending one of our country's oldest and most dynamic institutions. Idealized, criticized, reinvented many times over, public education continues to play a crucial role in our nation and our future. Public schools quite literally save lives. Many of us remember the words of the famous sportscaster Howard Cosell, who used to say, I just tell it like it is. And he did, often in a very irritating way. This has become particularly important to all of us in public education as we've struggled to find the right course in recent years. While the emphasis on accountability and achievement is very appropriate, we must defend public education and educators. We must insist that everyone tell it like it is, like it really is, in classrooms all over the state. We must stand up for public education. To be fair, we must also acknowledge our own problems. We don't do an adequate job of educating all of our children. The transfer situation illustrates that we sometimes shortchange those who need our help the most. We have much to do. The people in this room are equipped to lead this work. Let me say that again. The people in this room are equipped to lead this work. We can and must invent our own reform. Instead of fighting against reform agendas that we believe won't make a difference, let's advance an agenda that will. We must stand up for public education. A few years ago, our country celebrated 2 major anniversaries in education that illustrate the 2 key goals public education has tried to serve. The 50th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education, and the 20th anniversary of A Nation at Risk. Brown was the centerpiece of public education's 170-year quest to provide universal access to schools, and as such was the symbol for the search for equity in American public education. A Nation at Risk marked the first official sign of a new goal for education in our country. Not just universal access, but universal proficiency, meaning that all children would succeed at high levels. Following the Brown decision, our country witnessed 2 decades of legislation that expanded the notion of universal access beyond race. Children living in poverty, handicapped children, women, homeless children, the children of illegal immigrants were all given access to the American dream through the public schools. By the late 1980s, the 170-year-old goal established by our founding fathers was complete. A free and appropriate public education was available to every child in America. Of course, the disparities in our society were still reflected in the schools. As more children of America's underclass took their seats beside the privileged, it became apparent that access was not enough to ensure excellence. America was a land of opportunity, but it was not always an equal opportunity. Including everyone isn't always easy. There's no question that we might all be more comfortable, more prepared to teach children who came from homes like ours. It would be easier if they all spoke English. Our test scores would be much better if the kids were better prepared for school. If only they were well-fed, well-groomed, hardworking, intelligent, and had parents who were engaged in their daily lives. The fact is, they may be none of these things. We take them anyway. We embrace them all. In 1981, President Reagan commissioned a panel to look at the quality of education in America. In some of the most dramatic language ever penned by a presidential commission, the group reported a rising tide of mediocrity in America's schools. The commission's conclusions were based on flat test scores, averages over the previous 20 years, and a dropout rate of about 30%. The commission hadn't bothered, however, to look at changes in the students taking the tests. The SAT, created shortly after World War II, was normed to a population of mostly upper-class Ivy League-bound males. Even into the early 1960s, only a small percentage of the population took the SAT. As more students had access to education and set their sights on college, a much larger portion of the population began to take this test. The flat rate of growth was really rather remarkable, and a remarkable testimony to the productivity of the public schools. The middle-level students were doing as well as the previously privileged group. As for the dropout rate, the commission failed to mention that the term dropout was created in the 1960s when more students were completing school than not. And we needed a descriptor for that new minority who were not obtaining their diplomas. The fact that the commission's work may have overlooked a few important details does not take away from the fact that it was the beginning of new expectations for public education. We're now supposed to educate all children to a much higher level, one formerly reserved just for the elite. The passage of No Child Left Behind was the first time the government weighed in on universal proficiency through legislative action. While it is the right goal, it remains to be seen whether our nation has the collective will to do everything required to make it happen. The current state waiver here in Missouri may have changed the details, but not the substance of accountability. Do we, as a state, have the will to meet our own standards? This is the question before all of us today, and I am convinced it is a question best answered by the people in this room. I know the work is hard. Because it's hard and because it will not get easier, we must help each other along the way. As I was thinking about this, I recalled an old leadership study about geese. This seems to fit. I'm sure all of you have heard this before. Fact one, as each goose flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for birds that follow. By flying in a V formation, the whole flock adds 71% greater flying range than if each bird flew alone. The lesson is that people who share a common direction and sense of community can get where they're going quicker and easier because they're traveling on the power of one another. Fact number two, when a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels the drag and resistance of flying alone. It quickly moves back into formation to take advantage of the lifting power of the bird immediately in front of it. The lesson is if we have as much sense as a goose, we stay in formation with those headed where we want to go. We're willing to accept their help and give our help to others. Fact number three, when the lead goose tires, it rotates back into the formation and another goose flies to the point position. The lesson is it pays to take turns doing the hard tasks and sharing leadership. As with geese, people are independent on one another's skills, abilities, and unique gifts or talents. Fact number four, the geese flying in formation honk to encourage those up in front to keep up their speed. Lesson, we need to make sure that we do a lot of honking. It's encouraging. In groups where there is encouragement, the production is much greater. The accomplishments are much greater. The encouragement is what we need to support our values and our effort. Fact number five, when a goose gets sick, wounded, or shot down, two geese drop out of formation and follow it down to help and protect it. They stay with it until it dies or until it's able to fly again. Then they launch out with another formation or catch up with the flock. The lesson is if we have as much sense as geese, we'll stand by each other in difficult times as well as when we're strong. I would add another lesson to this old fable, and that is that the people on the outside of the flock protect those in the center. The geese in the center may not be the leaders, they may not be those most at risk, they may not be those falling farthest behind, but they're in the center of the flock because that's what the rest of us do, is protect them. The point is there's much we have to do. We must continue to improve student performance. If one district fails, we share the responsibility for helping them improve. We can't leave anyone out, and we can't make progress without working together. Collectively, we share responsibility for 900,000 children. They are all mine, and they are yours too. They need our love, and they need deserve the best education we can provide. We owe them the same opportunity we want for our own children and grandchildren. We also need each other. We must foster a culture that includes and fosters leadership in everyone. Our culture can and must encourage treating everyone with respect, with caring, and with high expectations for success. Whether we like them or not, whether we agree or we don't, Whether they look or act like us or very different, we are all Missouri. Michael Fullen, great guru on the topic of change, says that conflict and resistance are absolutely necessary for positive change to occur. We certainly have our share. He goes on to say that relationships must improve if change is to be successful. For that reason, I ask each of you to be kind to one another. Each of us needs and will continue to need the caring support of our colleagues in the days ahead. Irrespective of title, position, years of experience, or any other arbitrary label that sets us apart, we're all in this together. No one of us is more important or more critical to our success than any other. As we start this school year, let's fly in formation, and let's keep our children at the center. Have a great year.